call Alex Ballinger to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow so many excellent maiden speeches today, in particular the member for Penrith and Solway, which I'm sure is definitely the top 5 of the most beautiful constituencies, rather than the top 10. I'm pleased to deliver my maiden speech today during this debate on building safety and resilience. After the tragic events at Grenfell Tower, the safety of our buildings has never been more important. Many residents in my constituency live in tower blocks, and they will be pleased to see the government taking practical steps to ensure that they can live in safety. I am honoured to have been elected to represent the people of Halesowen in Parliament. Thank you for putting your faith in me. However you voted, I am here to serve you. I would first like to thank my family, and in particular, my wife, Nida. You have been incredibly supportive and patient as I've gone through this campaign in my first weeks in the House. I'm also pleased to follow my predecessors, James Morris and Dame Sylvia Hill. James was the MP for Halesowen and Rowley Regis for 14 years. He was a hard-working constituency MP who championed mental health in Parliament and sought to protect the heritage of the town. He also sported a distinctive hairstyle, and he was affectionately known as Professor Snape in the constituency. Whilst we have our political differences, like the Harry Potter character, I think James was one of the good guys in the end. From 1997 to 2010, Halesowen and Rowley Regis was represented by Dame Sylvia Hill. A passionate campaigner for her constituents, Sylvia was easily recognised as she canvassed the streets of Halesowen in a bright red jacket. She also served 10 years as Deputy Speaker and has the dubious honour of being in the seat when, for the first time in 400 years, protesters stormed the floor of the Commons. The last time this happened, they were led by King Charles I, but unlike the 17th century, Sylvia restarted the debate after only 20 minutes and even allowed the protesters to escape with their heads. She was well loved by her constituents, and they still remember her fondly. Judging by the puzzled looks on many members' faces when I introduced my constituency, I think it's fair to say not everyone has heard of Halesowen. Well, Halesowen is a wonderful market town on the edge of the Black Country and includes the once influential Halesowen Abbey. In the 13th century, Halesowen was larger than Birmingham, and the Abbey ruled over lands as far as Wednesbury, Walsall, and Whalley. Whilst the Abbey's lands are now diminished, Halesowen remains a juggernaut in the West Midlands. And the whole constituency was at the very heart of the Industrial Revolution. Cradley Heath, Cradley, and Quarry Bank were the centres of chain making in the 19th century. But conditions for workers were terrible, and it was in Cradley Heath in 1910 that Mary MacArthur led women chain makers on a 10-week strike against starvation-level wages. Her campaign led to a doubling of women's pay and helped establish the principle of a minimum wage in the UK. Mary would later stand for Parliament in Stourbridge, and she nearly became the first woman to sit in the House of Commons. Mary MacArthur's campaigns for women's rights and better working conditions will be remembered this Sunday at the Women Chainmakers Festival in Cradley Heath. Newer to the constituency is the lovely green suburb of Williscote, which was home to the 19th century industrialist Ernest Stevens. Ernest made his fortune manufacturing kitchenware in Cradley Heath and donated several parks to the people of the area. Stevens Park in Williscote, Stevens Park in Quarry Bank, and Mary Stevens Park in Stourbridge. Ernest was well known for his philanthropy, if not his imagination. I mention Ernest Stevens because at the start of the century, my great-granddad was one of his drivers, and I like to imagine him travelling across the constituency, taking his boss to work each morning. But it's not just living in the same community where I followed in my ancestors' footsteps. My great-granddad, like generations after him, served his country overseas. Wilfrid Ballinger fought at the Somme in 1916 before being wounded by shrapnel and being evacuated back to Stourbridge. His son, Frank Ballinger, served in the Navy and managed to take part in the Italian campaign in 1944. And my dad, Robert Ballinger, spent 35 years in the Air Force, serving in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Iraq. So when both my brother and I followed in their footsteps and were sent to Afghanistan together in 2006, we felt like we were continuing the Ballinger family tradition. At the start of that tour, perhaps, I didn't realise the reality of conflict. But I was reminded during the election when I met Sue Crooks in Halesowen, the mother of Marine Jonathan Crooks. I didn't know John, but he was a Halesowen hero who served in Afghanistan and was tragically killed protecting his comrades. As someone who has served alongside brave servicemen and women like Jonathan Crooks, I want to use my time in this House to ensure we are doing everything we can to support our armed forces and the friends and family that they leave behind. When I left the Marines, I became an aid worker, helping deliver supplies into Syria and helping refugees rebuild their lives in neighbouring countries. And in what felt like full circle, 3 years ago I played a part in the evacuation of Afghanistan when it fell to the Taliban. My team evacuated hundreds of vulnerable people out of the country to safety over the border in Pakistan. Many who had worked alongside the British 10 years earlier, many who were at risk simply for who they were. I particularly remember helping the dozens of young women from the Afghanistan youth football team, fleeing punishment at the hands of the Taliban. And I'm pleased to say they're all now safely here in the UK rebuilding their lives. I know debates on refugees in this House can become heated, but I hope to use my time here to advocate for all victims of conflict, whoever they may be. I know the people of Halesowen will stand up for the vulnerable because I've seen it myself. I was humbled to visit Life Central Church to see the help they are giving to struggling young people, to asylum seekers, and for the older generations. And I'm honoured to know members of the Yemeni Halesowen Community Association who were recently recognised with the Queen's Award for their voluntary service. And finally, I visited hard-working volunteers manning food banks at Cradley Heath Connect, Manor House Pantry, and Holy Trinity in Old Hill. These are just a snapshot of the charitable work happening across the constituency, full of compassionate people dedicated to serving their community. So as I begin my time in this place, it is in this tradition of service that I want to continue. The service that my family has given in uniform, the service the people of Halesowen have demonstrated to their community time and again, and the service this government will deliver as we rebuild this country. Thank you again to the people of Halesowen for electing me as your representative. Just as I have served my country for the last 20 years, I will give the same dedication to serving you as your Member of Parliament.